Hi, everybody. I'm Candid Stanisci of CFL Talk. Welcome to the Spanglish World Network on Zingo TV, channel 250. And of course, please remember to download the Zingo TV app at the respective app stores for iOS and Android devices. While you download, please make sure you approve of what we do because it's important. While you download this app, anyway, my computer just froze. And so I don't even know if you can hear me. It's also available on Google Chromecast, Amazon Fire TV sticks. I see they're nodding. So Roku sticks, and also all smart TVs 2016 forward. Now joining me as usual is David Morassutti. David, how you doing?
I am good. I am good.
Oh, okay. See, it froze because I tried to adjust the volume on my so I could hear you, and then it froze.
I see. I see.
I can hear you. Yep. Okay.
Beautiful.
So this week has been an interesting week. We didn't know or believe or think that they could have as good a weekend as they had last week. Now, I think it'd be fair to say that it wasn't quite as good as the last weekend, but it was pretty good this week. At least ended well anyway on Sunday with an overtime game. But it all started with Edmonton losing again, this time to Winnipeg. And they
Well,
just keep stubbing their toe.
yeah, and I mean they made it. They were competitive in the first half, but the second half they just didn't have it. They just didn't have it, especially in the third quarter of the game. I think what you're seeing here is just a team that is stuck in the mud. They're stuck in the mud right now. Like they don't, they're making mistakes. The mistakes are costing them, right? When you're losing by 2 scores, right? Like you can't be making mistakes, and you can't be making mistakes that will come back to bite you. And that's what's happening right now to the Elks, in my opinion, right? Like you look at the team on paper. There are some decent players on this team, but as a collection of talent, they're just not getting it done, right? And it doesn't help that again they're going up against a Winnipeg team that had a lot of question marks, but they don't make a lot of mistakes. And if they do make mistakes, you got to take advantage. Um, and like when you get an opportunity to score within, I think they were on the 6 yard line. When you get a chance to score a touchdown, you shouldn't be coughing up the ball on an interception in that. Like things like that. If people are wondering what's wrong with the Elks, it's things like that. That's for sure.
Their quarterback, Taylor Cornelius, has all the tools. One thing's been
Mhm.
established that he doesn't have the confidence to make the throws. The short ones, yeah, he can do okay. And I think his long passes are better than his mid-range passes. Unfortunately, his long-range passes aren't that good, and aren't good enough. So, his passing game, which, you know, we see over and over again, and I'm one of the people guilty of it, of saying that quarterbacks need to be able to run. And this guy can run. But the problem is we cannot forget that they need to be able to pass as well. And whether he can or cannot, I don't think we're not there yet. We're not at the point where we can say he can or can't. All we know is that he doesn't look like he can, and it looks, um, you know, like a guy who just doesn't have confidence. It's not that he's a bad quarterback. I think it's just that he lacks the confidence, and whenever he makes a mistake, for some reason it compounds. And that's tough when you're in that kind of situation where your confidence, we saw it last year with Evans. And Evans at the end of the season said, "Yeah, I lacked the confidence going into this season. I had some stuff happen and I never got over it." And I'm just wondering whether that's the definition of what's going on with Taylor Cornelius.
I think so. I think look, there's probably a lack of confidence in the team around him, right? When you get beat as bad as they've been beat this season, when you think your things are going well, but then turn of a dime, something goes wrong. It's the mental hurdle that's the toughest thing for a team that's in this situation, right? Because we've seen them take a lead, It's like, oh, is this finally the week they pull together? And I'm sure they're probably wondering, at what point are we going to screw this up?
Right.
I'm sure there's some of that, right? Or trying to be too perfect, right? And of trying to not make the mistake is also the wrong approach that some teams take when they're in the position, like Edmonton finds himself, right?
Yeah, like the
You can't.
receivers squeezing the ball too hard during the
Yep.
reception, and then wanting to make the big play. So you're not looking at the ball, you're looking after the ball. All these silly little mistakes are the ones where, like in hockey, we refer to squeezing your hockey stick too hard.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that's the big one. There is you can't be afraid to do things just because it didn't work out once, twice. You have If you believe in your game plan, if you believe in the ability of the players on your team, you have to bet on that it's going to work. And unfortunately for Edmonton, they're just not getting that right now. Like they do have, again, as I said, they have good. There's good players on this team, but if the quarterback doesn't have confidence in them, and if the team maybe doesn't have confidence in the quarterback, you're not going to go very far, right? We're seeing the counter with some of the good teams, and we know which teams are the good teams because you're looking at the guy behind center, right?
Yeah.
Under center, technically, right? Every coach will tell you, "Show me a good team, I'll show you a good quarterback." It's not rocket science, unfortunately, in the Canadian Football League on what leads to success.
Well, we've seen what happened with Crum in Ottawa.
Right. You give him a chance, and like he's how we always coaches always say, yeah, I don't know if we can go with the inexperienced guy, the guy that hasn't had a lot of the opportunity. And then you get someone like Dustin Crum who comes along, and it's just like, I this is not that difficult. Now, obviously, if you look back at Dustin Crum, he was there last year. He's a younger guy too. I didn't realize how young he was. 24 years old. That's young for the CFL.
That's
Usually
young for a starting quarterback in
young
this.
for, yes, very much so. But this is also somebody who's had a very pronounced career if you look at it, right? He was an MAC most valuable player, MAC offensive player of the year in 2021. He was the MVP in the Frisco Bowl. Like that's a pretty substantial.
It's a bowl game.
Yeah, it's a substantial game, right? There's pedigree here. Kent State's a pretty, like, some might not think of Kent State as a big program, but that's a big program. So I guess, like, in bringing this back to Taylor Cornelius, they got to find a way to see if he can get that confidence back. I I don't know if that's going to be possible, like, but he's going to have to figure this out because I don't know. It's either going to be make a change for once and for all at the quarterback position, or organization is going to make a change elsewhere, and it might not have a choice.
Yeah. Well, Winnipeg has played well this season, and they played not so well. One thing you do know about Winnipeg is they refuse to lose two in a row. So it gets harder and harder to beat this team when they're up against it because they're constantly a very proud team that does know how to avenge a loss in their own minds. I mean, and they don't let poor play fester. Which is the opposite of what we're talking about in Edmonton. So everything we said about Edmonton, look at it. It's the opposite with them. They make a mistake. For example, like Caleros makes a mistake, turns around and throws two touchdowns. Throws the interception, but throws two touchdowns. Their running game is slow to start. It's not working. It's not working. They keep insisting on. Again, this is the mirror image of Edmonton. Keep trying, keep
Mhm.
trying. Oh, and guess what? By the third quarter, the run game now is all of a sudden working. And when the run game starts working, the quarterback has more time. And also, so do the receivers. And so it's all a domino effect, and it's all about getting on a decent roll. And the thing with a team like Winnipeg, you have to play really well to deny them a good roll. Unfortunately, with Edmonton, wait, they'll self-destruct. And that's the unfortunate truth about these two teams. And it was a 28-14 game, Edmonton played well enough to be in this game, but you know what? When you add it all up, when Winnipeg needs to do something, guess what? It happens, it gets done, and they win. And they're still a team, trying to regain their stature, right? But they're struggling a little bit. They're having a little bit of difficulty. Playing against the East, they've had issues more than they've actually had against the West. And of course, BC is their nemesis now. And so, with that said, you know, we've seen a season where really um, teams have jumped up like Ottawa to say and to show that they're in the mix for the Grey Cup. And may not be first place in the East, but really, does that matter? Do you have to finish first to win the Grey Cup? We know that's not true. You don't have to. So it's all a process. And right now, because of a quarterback like Crum, they're looking really good. And especially when we see a season so far where David, the quarterbacks are falling like, my goodness, like dominoes. There's five of them,
Yeah,
five starters gone.
five starters gone. Like it's crazy to think that it was an issue last year. Like this is not a
Issue
new
every
issue
year.
for the
It's an
CFL.
issue every year.
Look, injuries happen. Injuries are unavoidable at times, but if you're the CFL, they've been trying to figure out for how long of how to protect the quarterback. Unfortunately, the best way to protect the quarterback is to have a good offensive line, right? Like
And teams spend
I
more money on the defensive line. What does that mean? It means the defensive line's more talented than the offensive line in general, which
yeah,
means the offensive line are usually struggling to maintain protection for the quarterback.
yeah, and unfortunately I can't tell if the stats, looking at the stats, if there's been more sacks this year than last year. I can't look at that unfortunately because the CFL's
That's
stats
another
site
issue.
does not do that. But to me, like you're looking at some of the injuries. I mean, we look at Mazzoli. That's an unfortunate one. Bo Levi Mitchell, um, that was on a contact play. Schultz, I believe, was the same thing too. We know what happened with Vernon Adams on a sack. That was a hurt. That was him right his and Trevor Harris again a collision, but it wasn't the one that was a little bit different because he was trying to pick up yards and it was kind of a tough bang bang play there. So sometimes it's just luck, unluckiness for the quarterbacks. But yeah, I mean, when you look at the difference between this week and last week there was more starting quarterbacks that were healthy than this week. If people want to know why the games were not as good this week as they were last week, how many teams didn't have their starting quarterback going into this week, or they lost their quarterback during the game, a la BC, right? Like that, it just goes to show how valuable that quarterback position is, and not just having a good quarterback, having a suitable backup.
But Crum proves in Ottawa proved the issue that you don't have to live with one really good quarterback. And let's keep this in mind. He was not the backup quarterback. He was the number
Nope.
3.
He wasn't even number 3. He was number 4. Really think about it, because Tyrell Adams was there too.
Yeah. Okay, I'll grant you that.
Well, I would say, I think in your case, yeah, he was probably number 3 in terms of the starting quarters, because Tyrell Adams is probably viewed more as like the short yardage quarterback. But this is quarterback 4 that they've had to use.
Yeah, and no, but still, it still makes the point. The point being that if Ottawa can find a fourth stringer or a third stringer that can start and do this, the question I asked last week, and I will be asking now till the end of the season, going into the off season and next year as well, because this will be a constant question I have. Why don't you keep trying quarterbacks? Because it appears that maybe it isn't about teaching quarterbacks. Maybe generally speaking, it might be true. But what I'm seeing is there are quarterbacks that understand the game without really having to sit around and do it for years. We see it unfortunately I'm jaded because I cover the Toronto Argonauts, and I see Kelly, who came in, one start, and then he's in the Grey Cup, and then he starts his season. And this guy doesn't have. I'm not saying he didn't work to get to where he is now. God, no, that's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying, I don't think every quarterback needs 4 or 5 years to develop in the Canadian Football League. I believe there are certain types of players, whether it be their ability to learn the game quickly, you know what I mean, David? Not, that somehow grasp it faster than others. Maybe they have to keep, again, this goes to what I've said a few years ago, is that they've got to work out a way to have more quarterbacks in camp, because you don't know how good a quarterback's going to be until you're put in a position where he has to play vis-a-vis Crum.
Yeah, no, this is also why training camp is too short. Because if you had a longer training camp, and if you had, now I'm not recommending we have 5-6 preseason games. I did hear the argument preseason's too short because guys don't get enough reps. I think training camp's too short in a lot of ways. You're basically spending most of your time getting your starter and your backup ready to go. You're not looking at your third, fourth, fifth, quarterback in camp, really, right? The Argos, the big thing for them was, okay, we knew Kelly was a starter. Who's going to be the backup? There
Right.
were 3 guys there, and the guy who was on the roster last year didn't even make it through camp. And
Right.
then they bring in 2 other guys, and there's question marks of whether they are even good enough. Right. If
But
Kelly
that speaks to what I'm talking about. That's a signal to me that a decision with the Argonauts, at least anyway, they make decisions on quarterbacks very quickly, especially under Ryan Dinwiddie.
Mm-hmm. I think the big one here is how much of the quarterbacks already in the room. So like a Kelly, Bo Levi Mitchell, Mazzoli, like the guys who are there and have had the experience of playing the CFL, how much are they pitching to help the younger guys, helping the other guys? Because if you want to make sure that the guy is not being thrown to the wolves, well, if he has time to learn from guys who have been in the situation that they're in, it certainly does help. Like Kelly learned from Kalal Bethel Thompson. That was the benefit of him not starting last year.
Mm-hmm.
He got to see everything. He got to be in the room with these guys. So this wasn't being thrown at him, without knowing it, right? And I think that's another important step is how much are you mentoring your younger quarterbacks? And not just, having them there, but also feel like they're a part of what's going on, right? They're not just there at practice. Who's helping them at the end of practice, maybe taking a few, like who's sticking around after practice to give them a chance to work on some things, right? Is there a receiver that's helping with that? Like Chad Kelly, I remember last year, there would be times where they're coming back from practice and he's sticking around throwing some stuff with some guys. Like those are things you have to do as the one that's not starting. Take the initiative a little bit, right?
So what you're saying in that, Emma, I'm sorry, because I want to sort of kind of interview the conversation just had. So what I'm hearing from you is it also has to do with relationships between the quarterbacks and their receivers and the running backs. In other words, getting to know the players that they're playing with.
Yeah, pretty much, right? Like let's not forget, practice is not very long either. It's 2 hours. At least Argo practices are 2 hours, and in a lot of cases, like they're short weeks. The Argos played Friday. They were off on the weekend. I'm sure they probably were doing some film and stuff. They got a flight to go out east. They're not going to have that much time to practice. These are things that coaches are going to have to. That's another thing that with the CFL is with the travel and teams are not spending 3-4 days where they're playing, right? They travel the night before, a lot of them, and next, like after the game, they're gone, they're out, they're moving on to the next where they got to go to next, right? So in season is not the time to get these quarterbacks in shape as well. That's the other thing. So it benefits when you have that guy in there from camp and you're putting in the work. No, and I'll tell you this: the CFL implemented this a few before the pandemic. I don't know if it was still going on because I didn't see it during training camp when I was there, but they did have a Canadian college quarterback,
Hmm.
somebody who is still in college, attend a CFL camp, spend some time to get to know what it's like to be in a training camp at the CFL level.
I believe they did it again this year. I seem
I
to
couldn't
recall
remember
them.
if they
I
did it
seem
again
to
this year.
recall them announcing some names of players that were going to certain camps.
I'd
But
have to look
it
into that a little bit more.
it could be have been last year. But I'm still going to reemphasize this. How many sets of receivers are there? How many extra receivers are in camp? And
Practice roster guys.
like, what's that? 3, 4,
Yeah, I would say at least 3 or 4 guys.
right? And there's I really believe it's important that the CFL allow more quarterbacks. I think the reason I say that is very simple and very basic. With the importance of quarterbacks in the Canadian Football League and the need to expand the opportunity to find those diamonds in the rough or those diamonds in waiting, it requires more opportunity. I mean, it's great that you want to narrow it down to 2 lottery tickets, but why not have 3 or 4 and give yourself that much more of a chance of finding the right kind of quarterback? And unfortunately, you have to have them ready. The thing with Crum in my mind is he was in the system, right? Even though we defined him earlier as the 4th pick, not 3rd, not 2nd, not 1st, right?
Mhm.
He was in the system, understanding the system, given a chance to have the ability and knowledge to exercise his talent on the field, right? And 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 that's what they need. I don't think they should underestimate how many quarterbacks that each team should have on their roster, active quarterbacks. And I say that because they're so important. Maybe it's time the Canadian Football League tries something innovative and says, you know what? I understand we don't want to have 3, 4 quarterbacks, but maybe we need to have 3 or 4 of them in all the time and have at least 2 of them dress, if not a third. Because then you get that third quarterback is there. And if you have a chance to put him in, it gives you a chance to see what he's made of. But if he's sitting on the sidelines in his clothes, in his street clothes, you don't get to find out. What ends up happening is you have a game with a quarterback in there that you're forced to use, even though they're not doing a good job. You don't have another option. I guess this is a throwback to what happened in the playoffs in the NFL with San Francisco. It's this idea for me that quarterbacks are so important. The well should never be dry. Not in that position. That position, there has to be a plethora of players ready to throw.
Yeah, no, you're right, and I do think that's something that it was a wake up call for the NFL, right? And look, you can't tell me there aren't quarterbacks out there. We keep hearing and saying, it's really hard to find a good quarterback. This is not about finding an extra Tom Brady out there, an extra, Ricky Ray out there. I'll bring it back to the CFL. This is about having someone that's capable of playing the position, capable of saying, you know what, I don't need the coach, and I can run this offense, right? We saw in Hamilton, right? Taylor Powell, third string quarterback coming in after the Hamilton lost first two. I'll say this: he looked like a rookie at times, but he also looked like someone that had shown confidence in keeping in a very tough situation.
Absolutely.
That was a competitive game. You could not ask for really more out of what he did in that situation.
Isn't that the point, though? The point is, you have a guy who's ready to play, who understands the system, who knows the players, and then you put him in there instead of going waiting till the next game and then bringing a guy and then trying to, you know, you know, basically have ask him to drink water from a fire hose. No, it's what Powell's another good example of, how does the league offer an opportunity for teams to have guys they don't know are good and have a chance to prepare them in case they are. You know, that's all I'm saying is that, sometimes what happens, and I think, Taylor Cornelius is an example, and you've made the point already, is that they're going to keep trotting him out there because he has a contract and because they really don't have any other option. How many times have we heard that from different people talking about the games, whether you want to talk experts or fans? They got to keep trotting him out there because they don't have anybody else. They put in their backup. They refuse to use the Canadian Ford. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, I'm totally confused as to why they can't, and the CFL can't ensure that there are enough quarterbacks out there that maybe you go a little deeper and give a chance to a quarterback who maybe nobody knew was good in practice, nobody knew was ready to play, but decided to bring him in, and now there's an opportunity for them to go out there and show what they can do instead of trotting out somebody that can't. That's the part that bothers me. You keep sending out the guy that that's having a problem. Send him up to the press box, but you can't. He's your guy, so he has to be there. No, I'm all for the belief that there are lots of crummy players out there, and by crummy I mean crumb-ish.
Well, and here's the issue right now. Like, by all accounts, Trey Ford was an early selection. He was a second round pick
Yeah,
by Edmonton, and I had it on good authority that there were teams that were looking to draft him in that draft, but they felt Edmonton kind of jumped the gun a little bit and took him earlier than they were planning on doing it. But there's a pedigree. Like, we're talking about trying, the one position you're not getting enough production out of, and you've got this young guy that was, yes, he had his injury issues, so he had some of his development taken away. But what do you hold? Like, I don't understand. I understand sometimes you don't want
something
your young
going on.
quarterback to be thrown into the fire, but come on, what are we doing here? What are we waiting for?
You got nothing to
Um,
lose except losing.
yeah, exactly. You don't have anything to lose at this point.
I
So,
just totally believe that sometimes assessment of players is incorrect, no matter how brilliant the assessors are. And the only way to find out their assessment is wrong is to actually put somebody out there that might, be as good as Crum or Powell. I mean, it's what they're going to have to do. I mean, professional football players, they play arena football. It's not what they played all their lives, but somehow they pick it up. So, and some are better than others in arena football. It's because you think like I think I know what makes a great Canadian Football League quarterback. They can run, it's important. They can pass, and they're elusive. Well, those are pretty general characteristics. You can get into more specifics, and the specifics are what requires the attempt to try quarterbacks. It's just, again, I'm repeating myself, so I'll stop. And they've got to work out a way to bring more quarterbacks in that they can start. When one fails, instead of trying them again, just try another one. Like I just don't see it. I mean, I understand the loyalty to a player. I get that. But with a quarterback, it's a different kettle of fish. That they have to be confident. Once a quarterback loses their confidence, they need to step away. They need to go into the press box. They need a reset. And you just keep sending him out there. It just almost seems like for Taylor Cornelius, it almost seems like he's getting worse all the time. Even though in the midst of getting worse, he has great moments, and then it destructs again. I just think there have to be more quarterbacks assessed in the Canadian Football League and bring them in. Let's see the quarter. There's enough out there, I think.
when we look, the Fox did an article on the Argos name and Chad Kelly being the lead of it. You know what? And I sent the article to you. I don't know if you read it.
I didn't get a chance to read it. No,
The first, I'm gonna actually,
read
because
the first paragraph.
I'm gonna read the very first paragraph because I told Frank, like, the first paragraph kind of speaks to the problem I have with the CFL because of of perception, not being able to change perception. Here's the first line of an article from Fox News on the CFL's Toronto Argonauts, the best team in the league. The Canadian Football League may be inferior football to the NFL, but their touchdown celebrations are right up there with and obviously they made a typo in the first graph, with the best of them. the Canadian Football League may be inferior football to the NFL. I had obviously two issues there. One, I like to know how often do they watch the Canadian Football League to make that proper assessment. But at the same time, perception there is perception in a lot of other places, right?
Yep.
If I'm being honest here, like this is not something that should. I see fans get upset when they see things like that, and I'm like, it's not like you're a fan. You're gonna obviously like the CFL regardless. But when somebody I know who had not watched the CFL football game in a long time come around and they see a game like the BC Saskatchewan one, they're gonna say that wasn't entertaining. That's not what I've been told about CFL football. That's so exciting, and it's because the quarterback play in that game, it was not. I will say this: it wasn't dreadful, but it definitely wasn't good. Not to the standard that we've seen all season, and especially from last week. The standard is, and look, you're gonna have teams with good teams, you know, good quarterbacks, bad quarterbacks. I get that, but the drastic level difference in levels that some teams have with the quarterback play, that's the CFL's problem right there. The gap is, I think, too far in a lot of places.
Yeah, and there needs to be an opportunity. They have to open up opportunities to more quarterbacks, and I'm more convinced than ever that while Crum and Powell and also Kelly spent some time, a year or two at least minimum, with the team that they've been successful with, but that's a year or two, or three. It's not five. And I think the talking heads are doing a disservice to our game when they say, "Well, a quarterback needs about 5 years to be a good quarterback." No, be quiet. You're wrong. No, the proof is out there. What you're saying is you're basically forcing teams to keep players on the hope that in year 3 or 4 or 5 they're going to find their groove. No doubt there's going to be the odd one that's going to do that, but I think the majority of opportunity for quarterbacks, we're seeing it this year, and I hope teams recognize it, is that give a guy a couple of years of serious, like you noted, right, serious education in the game, and see what they can do. You don't have to wait 5 years. 5 years is a long time. It's a long, long time in sports, in the sports world. No, they only need, if a quarterback doesn't figure it out, there has to be a new guideline. If a quarterback can't pick it out in 2 or 3 years, then they've got one foot on the wrong side of the fence. Keep bringing guys in, and I assure you, I'm believing this more and more, that there are guys out there who just haven't been given the chance that can actually do it. There are so many. You defined who he was, right, Crum, and how his history in college football, how great it was. Do you know how many college football teams there are? And do you know how many college football quarterbacks that fit the definition that you highlighted in your little conversation about Crum? There's like 10, 20 of them a year, for goodness sake, and they don't all
Well,
go to the NFL.
right. They go. Some of them don't even go. They go to the XFL. They go to the USFL. They'll they'll go for a practice roster because practice roster pays more than a CFL quarterback makes sometimes, or no, I should say a backup, because starters make pretty decent money in the CFL.
Yeah.
But it just goes to show one of two things. I still believe the quarterback position should not count towards the CFL's salary cap.
I'm inclined to agree with you, at least for one quarterback.
Here's what I would say though. I would say you can do one of two ways to do this to avoid having a team overspend on a quarterback. I mean, look, it's a team's money. If they want to spend the money, let them spend the money, right? If they want to lose money, that's their business, in my opinion. But you can say you can spend up to this amount on a quarterback, but it won't count against your salary cap. You could do that. You can do what I've been saying too, which is maybe start upping your salary cap a little bit. I don't know. Like that's not really going to work because, as you say,
Stay
teams are
where you
just going to
were.
spend.
I'm with you. I'm with you where you started, and where you started is perfect for me. Enhance the play of quarterbacks, enhance the temptation for quarterbacks to come to the Canadian Football League. Because the issue is we don't have enough good quarterbacks. We don't have enough number one quarterbacks. We just don't have enough of them. So you can talk about 5-year plans in educating them. But a decent contract will get some pretty good quarterbacks. You can't tell me that that any of the GMs in the Canadian Football League, if they were told, you know what, you got $500,000 you can give to up to $500,000 you can give to a quarterback, and it doesn't count against the cap, right? And then you still have to get a second quarterback. I just don't see how they wouldn't salivate.
Yeah, there has to be a change in the
We need quarterback.
in the way that quarterbacks are done in this league. I think, yeah, the idea of a guy spending X amount of years as a understudy, 1 year, I think, proved with Chad Kelly, 1 year as an understudy was more than enough for him. And it also helps that your coach.
There you go. Now we're getting there.
Your coaching is the other thing. Get rid of this stupid coaching cap. There are teams who have gone without a quarterback coach because they could. The Argos in one season, the season that they brought in, Frank, you might know the offensive coordinator, former Montreal offensive coordinator from the Owls. They brought
French name. Oh
yeah,
my goodness.
like
he was up in the press box, and he was told to come down, and oh shoot, he was a head coach in Winnipeg, I think. Anyway,
okay, hold on. If you give me 2 seconds, I can find the name for you. Because Jacques Chapdelaine.
Yes, there you go.
He was technically working with the quarterbacks, but they didn't have a quarterback coach right away. I think it was that season, and because of the coaching cap, and then eventually they brought one in later in the year. Under no circumstances should a team have to go without a quarterbacks coach because, no, sorry, the rules dictate you can only spend this much on coaches.
You're making the point again that the point is, of course, that you need the quarterbacks are. If you don't have a quarterback, you lose. We saw it in the playoffs with San Francisco. We've seen it every season with the Canadian Football League when they lose their number one quarterback and they don't have an appropriate, at least a quarterback that doesn't lose them the game. That's a low bar. That's a low bar, but that's a bar that a lot of teams can't meet. Bring in a guy that won't lose you the game, and this is not. And I apologize to every quarterback in the Canadian Football League. I apologize with all my heart, but I truly believe that there has to be a bigger choice, more quarterbacks to choose from. There has to be a way to have, an accelerated way of giving quarterbacks an opportunity. And you're right about exhibition season. You don't put them in game situations. You don't know how they are in a game situation, even though that game situation is, that's more of a recruitment game than it is, a contest. But still, it gives you an opportunity to check out a quarterback. That they need more quarterbacks. That there has to be. They have no choice because quarterbacks are the Canadian Football League is quarterbacks. And I know that probably offends a lot of players in other positions, and I apologize, but it's something that I believe without any, without prejudice.
Yeah, we're seeing it right now in the league how viable it is to have a quarterback that's able to perform. The good teams are getting good quarterback play. The teams that are not getting good play, it's because they're not getting the good quarterback play.
And their proof is in the pudding. There are good quarterbacks out there who aren't necessarily the first choice of any team. Their third choice, fourth, you know?
Yeah.
So there has to be that opportunity to give players an opportunity to show what they can do. And I guess I'll offer you the last comment on quarterbacks, and we can talk about the games. We can talk about what's next.
No, let's go to the
Okay.
games because it's going to talk
Let
more
we
about
cover
quarter.
the Argos. That's the team that we cover and follow the most. Admittedly, I'd like to make sure we talk about them. We've only got a few minutes left, and I have to say that this is a team game in game out. You know, is there something by definition that makes the Toronto Argonauts 5-0? I think I've come to the conclusion after watching them play. It's athleticism. This is a very athletic team. Each and every game, we see spectacular receptions, spectacular runs, spectacular defensive plays. This is a team of elite players playing different positions. They now have a special teams with elite players. And elitism, I think, is what fans love the most. And I hope Toronto sports fans get a chance to go check out the Argos, because that game, some of those receptions, more than one player made, were amazing. We know this happens in the Canadian Football League all the time. We have great receivers in this league, but to see them on one team and play that one game, it happens a lot. We saw it in BC until retirement. It's spectacular. It is why the Argos are 5-0. I'm not raining on the defense. I'm not raining on the offense. I'm just saying the spectacular play, game-winning plays. We're seeing them, and teams have to have players on them that make them. This is what's missing from Edmonton.
Yeah, the Argos defense can make plays. The Argos defense is a very cohesive unit. You know, they're like they don't have. If you look at the Argos defense, you know they have good players, but you don't hear people talking about one player on that defense, right? It's not the Win McManus show. It's not the
Peters,
Jamal Peters show. It's the Argos defense, right? If anything, the person who probably gets the most talk about that defense is the coordinator, Corey Mace,
absolutely.
right? He's just got that. It's a well-oiled machine, right? And I think that's
Playing
what's
without
worked
their
for them.
captain too.
Playing without their captain, playing without a couple of their really good cornerbacks who are injured. Like this is a defense I think is going to get better as the season goes along because they're playing guys who might normally not be playing a lot. So yeah, I think what's allowed the Argos to be 5-0. Ryan did when he says you wouldn't be 5-0 if you're not getting good quarterback play.
Right.
Chad Kelly's putting himself into that MOP. I think he'll be. It might be him and Claros by the end of the season. And I think their defense is not. They're they might give up yards, they might give up plays, but it's situational
When
football
they
that they
need the
do
big
very
play,
well.
when they need the big play, they make it. This is the elitism. We've watched Winnipeg be like that. I want to make sure people understand. I'm not talking about like the Argos are unique. This is not unique. I'm talking about they're replicating the way what great teams look like. They make spectacular plays. They make key plays at key times. They have a quarterback that can keep the game going and moves the ball and doesn't throw a lot of interceptions. All those things. Um, I guess I'm trying to sell the game to Toronto sports fans to give it a shot because I really think that if more people were in BMO Field to watch the team, they would be. I know they are because the ones that are there are so excited about what's going on. I'm just I guess I feel bad for people who are missing out on something really good. Winnipeg when they were doing well, there were so many people in the stands. It's a great way to have a great team represented by their fans.
Well, the Argos got to keep it up, and the thing is, they can't be a one and done type of team this year. They got to be able to do what they can
Well,
to
they've been
sustain this.
sustaining it now, right? Under Dinwiddie, they've done what what Pinball said they wanted to do. The same thing that's going on in Winnipeg. As much as maybe we're throwing shade on Winnipeg because they're losing games, and who they're losing to, but we're learning that maybe they're not losing to bad teams after all. And then BC Lions, and Ottawa's doing what they're doing. This is great. This is what we're looking for. Exciting football.
Yep, and the good teams, BC, Toronto, Montreal has had their ups and downs. Ottawa, the teams that need to do well to have some sort of, hopefully, some excitement in this market again, in the CFL, the big teams in the big cities.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, the word has to get out there. We're doing the best we can, in as far as talking about the game and the way the league works. There's still, I said before, and I'll say again, there it appears that they're having a little bit of an issue with statistics and stuff like that. It's unfortunate and it's unacceptable, but I don't know that it's not explainable. Do you know what I mean? I'm very unhappy with the Canadian CFL.ca because I've talked great words about them. I've said many great words about them. I've had great thoughts about them, and they've done a marvelous job. And this isn't an individual thing, but it really strikes at the core of my heart when it comes to the Canadian Football League that the webpage dedicated to the league by the league can't tell you how the game was won statistically.
Yeah, and who's leading the league in passing yards, who's leading the league in touchdowns, who's leading the league in sacks. That's I'm sorry, like I understand that they're moving on to a new system and things like that, but that stuff you have to figure out ahead of time
The
because now
same
you're
as the quarterbacks. You got to have a plan B, man.
well, you need to show your fans that you're doing what you can to make the game, make the game.
Don't worry. There's a new quarterback coming in a couple of weeks. Just hang in there for the next few weeks. There's a great quarterback coming in 3 weeks. That
Somebody might
doesn't
want
work.
to go make a wager right now, and they need stats to do it, and they're not going to be able to do that. That's not good for the CFL. They want people to be betting on the games. And that's not going to happen if people aren't able to get that information.
Well, bettors like to think that they can look at information and figure things out because they have that information with them. So you're 100% right, because all those decisions on who to bet for or whatever, they don't bet on anomalies.
No, they don't.
That's why they call it the odds.
Exactly, and I'm one of those people.
Right? They need the odds to understand. Okay, final word to you.
I'm very curious of what can Ottawa keep this going. I mean, they're right now. I'm seeing a surge in their play. They got Hamilton this week. That's a huge game in
Very
the
big.
East, right? I think right now they're second in the East. They could solidify that second spot within the next few weeks. And Calgary, Dickinson kind of threw the team out there and said, "We either got to play better or go get better players."
Ouch.
Ooh,
And
boy.
he's the guy that does that, right? Who would
Yeah,
have ever thought that that's the kind of language that a GM in Calgary would use?
I know. Huffnagel wasn't like that. You didn't hear from John Huffnagel.
Next man up. And
Next
there
man.
was always a man there.
Yeah, exactly. So it's a very interesting situation they got going there.
Well, those are two good teams to discuss because in essence they're diametrically opposed at this time.
Yeah, exactly.
So they speak to two different trends, one trending up, the other trending down, by virtue of their recent records. Thanks for doing this, David.
Thank you, Frank.
All right, he's David Morassutti. I'm Candid Frank Stanisci. Thank you for watching. It is a lot of fun doing this as usual. So thank you for watching CFL Talk, airing live Mondays at 9 p.m. The show can also be heard on the Spanglish World Network. For CFL Talk, news, entertainment, and other sports programming watcher, here on SpanglishWorld.ca. Spanglish World. Watch it, hear it, read it, download it, and live it. And don't forget, Candid Frank Stanisci on YouTube. See you soon.